to start up on part 2 of Meet the Ministries with the worship team. Find out some more criteria for selecting worship songs and a whole lot of other information. So great to have you back. Let's get started. So last week we ended our session talking about the 4 criteria for selecting songs. The first one are lyrics that are biblically accurate, theologically rich, and Christ exalting. The second one, songs that are singable musically, not difficult to learn or sing. And the third one, does it fit into the liturgy of the service? And now let's continue with our discussion and learn what the 4th criteria is, and a lot more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, did you want to say anything else about that aspect of our song selection?
Well, the song selection, and even though we built up a big, almost 100 songs in the catalog,
Mm-hmm.
we're also slow to add new songs.
Yes.
So let's talk about that, because we get requests for new songs, and we're happy to add songs that meet the criteria that we've been talking about.
Right.
But why are we also slow sometimes to add new songs?
So again, it goes back to our primary goal, which is we want, as a congregation, to be worshiping together, to be admonishing each other with these songs. And in order to do that, you have to be able to actually sing the song, connect to the song, and it just takes time. It takes repetition.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think of maybe what your favorite song is of all time, I'm almost sure that that wasn't your favorite song the first time you heard it.
Mm-hmm.
And with any kind of music, it just takes some repetition for you to learn the song, to become familiar with it. And then all of a sudden you can't stop thinking about it, stop singing it. But it takes time. And so even though there are times even in our liturgy planning where, oh my goodness, I know the perfect song that would fit with the psalm we just read or this message that we're going to preach, and it just would fit perfectly, nobody in the congregation knows it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not, it's not a good choice to try and introduce a brand new song, even though it might fit, lyrically perfectly in the liturgy. It won't connect. People won't connect with it as much that first time you hear it. So even things like that, we try to plan ahead. One principle we try to stick to is if we introduce a new song, we try and do it 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And hopefully by that 3rd week, people are starting to learn it. And then on subsequent weeks, we want to not push this to the bottom of the pile completely. We want to, again, repeat this within a few weeks so that it becomes something that's familiar.
Yeah.
Because once a song's familiar, then you can really engage with the lyrical content of it.
Right.
Think of something like Great Is Thy Faithfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Probably my favorite song, probably my favorite hymn. And the content of that is just so rich and wonderful and encouraging about the nature of God. But it's familiar, it's known,
Mm-hmm.
and because it's known, then the lyrical content, it circulates within your mind, within your heart.
Mm-hmm.
So, we try, because we're trying to introduce songs in that way where we can learn them, we also don't want to try to introduce 5 new songs in a month.
Right.
It's just not possible.
Right.
Or even more than one new song in a service.
Mm-hmm.
Even trying to introduce 2 new songs in the same service, it's tough. It's tough for people to really engage.
Yeah, it takes away from the overall goal.
Right. And even though the band might be able, the band will learn. We learn songs. We learn new songs. I listen to a new song 100 times. It's not an exaggeration. I listen to it until I can't hear it and do it wrong because I'm so used to hearing it right.
Yeah.
And by the time we get to rehearse it and we get to play it, we're into it.
Right.
Because we've learned it and we're familiar with it. But that's not enough for what we want to accomplish. Mm-hmm. It's not enough that, that we as a ministry kind of get this song, we know it, we're excited about it. It's going to take a few times for the congregation to start to learn and connect to that song.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll actually listen not only repetitiously, but I'll also listen to different versions of the song.
Mm.
I love getting on Apple Music, and maybe they'll sponsor us after I said that. I love getting on there and just you put in the song and you find out, oh, there's 17 different versions of the song. Here's a choral version.
Mm.
Here's an instrumental with absolutely no singing at all. And I'll go through all of those and just go through the song over and over again. I don't know. It gives me a different view of that, especially when we sit down and then play it for the first time. And I'll say, oh, Glenn, what do you think about this?
Mm-hmm.
I heard this somewhere, and I thought that sounded really good with what we have going here, with the flute, with the keyboard, with the extra guitar, whatever we might have up there. So
Yeah.
I like to do that a lot.
Well, I think that brings up also a good point for us to consider. Is when we're choosing songs, we've just talked a lot about it's more about the what we're singing.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about the theological content, the singability
Mm-hmm.
of that, and then we come in and try to provide more of the instrumentation accompaniment to that. What's a way that we can come alongside the truth of that song
Mm-hmm.
and play it in a way that people sing it and then learn the truth of it?
And
What helps with that?
specifically people in our congregation.
Yeah.
That how can we play it in a way that we as a local church body are most likely to connect with the lyrical content of this song?
Yeah, and sometimes we try to grow, our ability
Mm-hmm.
in that, because I think as people, like, God has created lots of different styles of music,
Yep.
and there's not one prescribed style of music.
Right.
So we have our normal, I think, style of music, but the goal never changes. And so sometimes we will, try out. We'll have different instrumentation
Mm-hmm.
on certain Sundays. It's not the same exact every Sunday. The goal is always the same,
Right.
but we're always evaluating, okay, is this helping us sing this song as a church?
And I'm not primarily interested in how much everybody likes the style of music that we're playing.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not it's not our primary goal.
Right.
Our primary goal is for us as a congregation to worship together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want to do something intentionally that would distract somebody from that, or it would turn somebody off from that for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are reasons. I don't know if we want to go. We still have one more criteria that I want to talk about, but now we're into talking about styles and preferences and whatnot. I just want to say there are legitimate reasons that you should offend people.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about truth and talking about biblical truth, there are things that people are offended at Christ.
Mm-hmm.
How can we expect that people are not going to be offended when we speak the words of Christ?
Yeah.
So there are reasons to offend people, but there's a lot of reasons that a lot of times we don't have to offend people.
Yeah.
It's not for a good, righteous reason.
Yeah.
And I think music is one of those areas where people have strong opinions.
Right.
They have a strong sense of what is, appropriate or not appropriate. And that doesn't always line up with biblical truth.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll hit that when we talk about our hope for the music ministry at the church. But let's get to that last one.
Yes, I do want to talk about that last criteria.
Yeah, because we talked about a bunch of what we're for, how we choose music, but what are some reasons why we would not choose a song?
Right, and this is a big one, and it comes up often because these days, there's so much kind of access to popular Christian music.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many platforms that that Christian music is available, that worship music is available on, and there are a lot of different ministries that publish their own music, that write their own music. They're extremely talented people. They produce really great sounding music.
Right.
But sometimes there are ministries that produce music where if you took the song and looked at it in isolation, the lyrics might be perfectly fine.
Right. It would hit all the criteria we just talked about.
It would hit the criteria, exactly. Mm-hmm. And yet, if you look at what that ministry is teaching, it's errant.
Mm-hmm.
It's things that are not biblically accurate, things that are not that are just detrimental, potentially detrimental to believers. And what people may not understand is when we sing a song in church and we put lyrics on the screen, just by copyright laws, I mean, we have to give credit to who it is that wrote those songs, who it is that published it. And when we put up, the name of a writer or the name of a ministry that has published a certain song, there's a sense of endorsement.
Right.
If we put it up in our church on that screen, there's a sense in which we're saying we endorse this ministry.
Right.
And there are just ministries out there we don't feel comfortable endorsing and perhaps sending our people off to go look up and listen, to sermons about who knows what.
Yeah. And I think we have to be very, very diligent when it comes to that contemporary music piece.
Yes.
When there is active teaching still going on.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean that we expect people to be perfect or any certain writer to have a model of perfect Christian life.
Right.
But are they pursuing Christ? Are they part of a church that's pursuing Christ truly? And and evaluating that. And if there's vagueness to it, then we steer away because there's enough good music that's clear.
There is.
And attached to, we would say, healthy churches, that we wouldn't hesitate for anyone in our church to explore more of their music.
Right. And I think you said something that's really important, and that is this a person or a ministry that is currently teaching something? Because they're really talking about endorsing teaching. You can't fully endorse the life of anybody that ever wrote any song because we're all broken, sinful people. So we're not saying that, the music if you look up the life of whoever wrote any of the music we sing, they're perfect. We're not saying that. But what we're concerned about is endorsing, specifically teaching that, the current, active contemporary ministries might be putting out there, where we just don't want to send our people. And not only that, there's actually, when we use music that other people have written, there's actually a royalty that's paid to, unless it's public domain, like a lot of older hymns are, but especially with contemporary music, there's actually a royalty that ends up getting paid to that ministry.
Right.
And so we have to ask ourselves as a church, is this a ministry we feel comfortable financially supporting?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people realize that we have to report every song that we sing as a church.
Right.
For our the copyright licensing agreement that we have to operate as a church in the United States.
Yeah. And that's not saying to people, well, you shouldn't listen to this music. I mean, there's some of it. You should have the same kind of critical eye that we do in evaluating what it is you're putting into your mind and heart.
Right.
But if it's lyrically sound, biblically sound, and you like it, I mean, I'm not saying don't listen to it. But there's a difference between what you listen to in your car and what we sing as a church body, and what we put up on, our screen at church.
Right. Yeah, and I tell my kids this all the time because they have songs, and I kind of walk them through. Hey, can we do this song at church, Dad? And I kind of teach them of this grid line and of what we do as a church. This is how we choose it. And especially when there's sometimes it's a great song, teaches great truth, but it's connected to something that I don't want to promote. We can listen to that in the car because I can tell my kids, hey, we'll listen to the song, but we're not going to go download this church's sermons afterwards.
Right.
But I can't do that with everybody that comes in on a Sunday of being able to nuance everything. So then we just think there's good enough songs that we can sing and don't have to nuance every aspect of it.
Yep. That's just it.
So, and we know other churches take different approaches than we do on that. But that's where we feel the conviction right now.
Right. And that is an area of conviction that we have, as a church.
Well, let's shift then to kind of the hope for the music ministry at Carson Valley Bible Church moving forward. What are some of the things that you guys are praying for? Some of the things you're thinking about, things that we're looking forward to, maybe wanting to do in the coming months or years? What are some of your guys' hopes just being involved in that ministry?
I mean, after one Sunday not too long ago, I'm hoping for somebody to come play a violin.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always been hope and talks about, specific types of musics, whether it's the cajon for percussion or adding a string instrument but I'm excited because of everything that you've done from the very beginning to encourage the congregation to participate,
Right.
and look at where we're at now with multiple keyboards up there almost every Sunday, multiple guitars, multiple singers, and different instruments. I think we're in a great place because we just continue to grow and continue to add more. And I think what I would look forward to is more people joining us, not from a selfish standpoint that we need more time off, but for more people to experience what we're experiencing. One of the best things that recently happened was both Christmas time and at Easter. And we had special services, and we had that stage full. We had almost everybody that was part of our worship team up there at the same time. I mean, that was so special from the standpoint that everybody got to experience that together. And I think that's what's important.
Yeah. It's nice to have that range, and I think that's a good goal for us to have, is to continue to grow as a team. Because just thinking biblically, you have everything in the Bible from, if you read Psalm 150, I mean, that describes a party. I mean, it describes a loud musical experience.
Yeah.
With a huge variety of loud instruments.
Right.
And there are probably some people that would be just scandalized if we actually took everything from Psalm 150 and did it on a Sunday morning in church.
Right.
Some people might be like, "Whoa, what's happening here?"
Right.
But there it is in the Bible, and there's everything. So there's the breadth of that experience all the way to the night of the Last Supper, where Jesus and the disciples sang a hymn before they went out to the Mount of Olives. There's no mention in there of any loud clashing cymbals or anything else. The picture I get from reading it is these are these guys in this room, and pretty not sure what's happening, kind of a somber time, really, with how Jesus is preparing them for his crucifixion. But these guys just singing together. Yeah. And I love to be able to have that breadth even within our ministry, whether it's everything from us singing with a CD, just fine, to or just me and my guitar, leading the congregation. Everything from that to, like Dave was just describing, Christmas and Easter, where we have more of this, let's make a big deal about God. He's awesome. And specifically thinking about his incarnation and his resurrection. I mean, let's make a big deal, and celebrate. Right. Let's celebrate. So I love to see that kind of growth. I'm also excited to see individuals growing, just in their confidence and their understanding of what it is to lead, what it is to worship. I love seeing the growth in our tech team. We haven't really talked about that very much.
But you would always talk about how they're a part of the music team, the worship team.
That person on the soundboard is the most important musician we have. And if they do their job really well, no one knows they're there.
Yeah.
And so, we I love our tech team. and they've grown so much as individuals. We didn't start with anybody that was an expert with sound engineering.
Yeah.
I mean, people have just had a heart to volunteer and learn.
Yeah.
We've done conferences, people we've
Right.
done trainings within ourselves.
But no one came into really any part of the music team as a professional.
No.
Because that's not what we're looking for.
No, not at all. And their role is really important in supporting our main goal.
Mm-hmm.
And people may not even realize, some of the decisions that we make from the technical side.
Yeah.
The way we light the church on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
The volume of the music. And I sometimes get, some complaints, it's too loud or it's not loud enough. But we're very intentional, and we've actually tried to objectively say, it's around 75 decibels in this part of the sanctuary is about our sweet spot. We want it to be loud enough that you don't really hear yourself. You don't
feel like you're doing a performance.
Yeah, if you're standing in the congregation, that you can sing and not feel like everyone around you is going to turn around and look at you.
Right.
And we also don't want it so loud that you can't hear everybody else sing.
Right.
And so even those decisions, the volume that we choose and the lighting, we have the lights up. We want to see each other. We want to encourage each other. And those are things that the technical team is responsible for. Our live stream, getting our live stream published every Sunday is really important. We have people get sick, or people are unable to come to church, or people are just checking out our church.
Right.
Get to experience, and all we want really is for them to have a reasonable view of what a normal Sunday is within our church. But that doesn't just happen.
No.
And without somebody, carefully mixing for that live stream, it's not going to sound right. It's not going to come across right. So, I'd love to see our team grow, and I'd love to start thinking, now that we are growing to the point we are, is even thinking about some other opportunities to grow in worship, like maybe having once in a while having a prayer and worship night or something at church, or maybe more musicians could get involved and lead one song on a Saturday night or something. Maybe that's less intimidating than just joining the team. Our church is growing numerically a lot, and it's inevitable we're going to have more musicians, more vocalists. As part of our,
and even people who have never played. We have that in our church, that they're learning to play an instrument as a part of this team, and we're encouraging that.
Yes, absolutely.
So, is there any? We talked about maybe growing as with instrumentation, violin, wonderful sound. Is there any instruments that are off limits, though, that we would not do?
I think there are. Some of it is the limitation that we have in our room, because we have not a huge room. If there are instruments that are particularly loud in and of themselves, so without any kind of amplification, it makes it then impossible to mix the rest of the instruments so that they can be heard without raising the volume of everything way up to match that instrument. So
bagpipes are probably out.
I know, and I play a little bit of bagpipes. I love the bagpipes.
I know.
It grieves me, but we probably won't have a full set of Highland pipes.
No, surround.
There are solutions.
Swimming pool aquariums that
get
into
or the drummer's aquarium. I don't know if we'll go there. But there are.
But like you're saying, our instrumentation is driven by our goal of music, and that's congregational singing. So we would probably say there's not one piece of instrumentation that's off the table in and of itself. It's more of, in our current space, does it aid in congregational singing? Can we help? Would we be able to make it help us in congregational singing? And there's just certain realities to our space that we couldn't make certain instruments work. But it's not the instrument itself is somehow more sinful than another thing.
No, I don't see it that way at all. And, any instrument like Dave mentioned, the violin. It's a beautiful instrument. It can really, enhance worship. It can also be played completely selfishly and
and take away from
prima donna kind of manner.
Take away from congregational singing.
Yeah, then that person is no longer leading anyone in worship because they're, so it's not the instrument.
Right.
I firmly believe this, and I've worked with worship leaders in the past who thought it didn't even matter if somebody was a believer if they were just playing an instrument.
Right.
That it was only the vocalists, as long as the vocalists are believers because they have to believe what they're singing. It didn't matter if the drummer or the bass player was, a believer or not, as long as they were a good musician. We don't think that way because I think biblically, if you look at the place of musicians in the Old Testament in particular, those musicians their job was to worship God, as part of, the temple worship.
Yeah.
So I think it's critical that anybody playing any instrument and wanting to lead worship, how can you lead where you're not going? That's the question.
Yeah.
So no, I don't have anything objectively that I would take off the table that I could think of right now, for other than practical reasons.
Right. Yeah, and philosophy of ministry reasons.
Yes.
For that too.
Yeah, and I know some people get all scared. I hope we don't put a drum kit in. I think if we brought a drum kit in, some people would get upset, and not for any really good reason other than maybe past experience.
Yeah.
Or a misunderstanding of, oh well, now we're trying to be a rock band or we're trying to do this, and I'm not saying that we are going to do that. We have no immediate plans to add a drum kit, but I think just in general we have to be careful to separate our own preferences and our own tastes from what is worship.
Right. Yeah, and that's really an ongoing prayer for the music ministry, not just for those who serve inside of it, but for how it plays a role in the life of the church. Is we want our music ministry not to become a checkbox of preference that if we hit, it's a church that you're at, or if we don't hit a church that you're not at.
Yes.
We understand that we all have preferences and likes when it comes to instrumentation, when it comes to certain things, but we want congregational worship to be at the top of that preference list, and that's what we're committed to as a church, and that it's more of kind of what we're singing and what we're trying to do, rather than maybe some of the particularities of how we accomplish that.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with having tastes and preferences. We all have them.
Right. The
thing that's wrong is assuming that God has the same preferences that you do.
Yeah,
that's where people
one's more holy than the other.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And if you just think about it logically, every instrument that is played in any church, every style of music that's played that you may hold sacred, you think it's the most sacred thing, at some point that was scandalous.
Right.
When it was introduced, initially it was scandalous. Oh my goodness, somebody brought an organ into the church. Scandalous. How can they dare do that? And again, so that's my prayer beyond just our team, the music team, but for the music ministry of the church, as you just pointed out, that we as a church would develop a heart of worship that goes beyond our own preferences. So we could just recognize, hey, this is my preference, this is my taste, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But this is not the totality of how people around the world worship our great God, because he's a lot bigger than my preferences.
Right. Yeah. I've never had a chance to do this. I hope that changes in the future. But I think most Christians would probably benefit greatly from seeing how Christians globally do congregational worship.
Yeah.
Because the style is going to look a lot different. The goal will, I think in healthy churches remain the same. But the style will look radically different depending on where you're at in the world and some of the context there. And we don't ever want to get on a a high horse from a Western perspective and go on how we do things.
Right.
That's more holy than how you do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it comes to some of the style preference categories.
And I think too, we want to ask ourselves, not what did I think of church today, but what did God think of church today?
Yeah.
What I heard another, I forget who it was, but I heard another preacher say this one time that just really cracked me up. They said, someone came up to me after church and they said, Pastor, I didn't really care for worship today. And he said, that's okay. We weren't worshiping you.
Yeah. That's a great line. Humbling and truthful.
It is. It's like, whoa, it makes you take a step back and think,
Yeah.
And we do get encouraged ourselves. And we come to church to be built up ourselves, to be encouraged ourselves. I'm not saying it's all this selfless act where we come and express our gratitude to God. We should definitely come and express our gratitude to God. But as you started off with that scripture, we encourage one another with these psalms, hymns. Those psalms and hymns are not about us. They're about our great God.
Right.
And he does get worship and glory, but they encourage us. They admonish us. They build us up. It's God's means of grace for building us up.
Exactly. And admonish one another as we're increasing our awe of God. To go back to what we were saying at the very beginning. That's what's going to admonish us is to see how big God is and see how wonderful the gospel really is. And song is a way that we get to do that regularly. Really, grand scheme of things, not a ton of physical minutes of the day.
No.
Right? We were talking about if we sing 4 songs, we're looking at roughly 16 minutes
at most
of singing. And so we want to be very particular, like what we want those 16 minutes to be just God glorifying, gospel centered, Christ exalting. And that's how we're going to actually encourage one another far more than anything else.
Yeah. And we will be singing together forever.
Yeah. It's part of...
Look at the book of Revelation.
Yeah,
we
it's
will
part
be
of eternity.
singing together forever.
Yeah. And it's going to be joyful. Well, anything else you guys want to add before we close up?
I was just thinking when you were talking about, that self gratification, when somebody comes up to you afterwards and mentions, how much they enjoyed the music. And it is, but to me, when I hear somebody come up and say, hey, really enjoyed the music today, or those voices blended so well, or that sounded so great. The first thing that goes through my head is, wow, okay, as a worship team, we made that message unforgettable. We made that
big
worship.
Encouragement. Yeah.
That's what's more important to me than anything else. Because I'm never going to play the song perfectly. I'm never going. I'm my own worst critic, and I don't have to worry about that anymore because it's all about the worship, and that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And hopefully that at most 16 minutes turns into a lot more time during the week, as it does for me, as those songs, you're taking the garbage out or whatever. The song just is rolling through your head.
Yeah. So it's very important. Music ministry is not just, the time before and after the sermon. It's all of worship.
Yeah.
So from beginning to end, we're worshiping, and music plays a big role in that.
Yeah.
By God's design. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And till next time.
All right.
Well, thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, feel free to message us at go@carsonvalleybiblechurch.com. If you would like to financially support this nonprofit ministry, you can do so at carsonvalleybiblechurch.com/give or scan the QR code on your screen. We'll see you next time.